Venerable Abbot, we are indebted for being allowed an audience today.
Please, my child. I would have done anything for an opportunity to personally welcome the infamous agnostic of Zevitz Enterprise. Now, Sid Zevitz, speak your piece, whatever it is that you have to say, or be gone from this house of worship.
Several days ago, my wife and co-owner informed me of your Abbey's troubles. Your resources are overwhelming from an influx of mana shock syndrome cases, and some of the Abbey's sisters succumbed after contracting the illness.
This is the unfortunate truth. These tragedies were entirely preventable, but both your company and Hivez sought to blindly compete with each other. Both you and Hivez have committed blasphemous acts by exploiting the scarce and sacred gift of mana. Knowing now what your misguided devotion to science has bred and wrought upon our homeland, have you any words of repentance that you wish to offer?
I have no words to offer in my defense. But on another note, I can say that we are determined to right the wrongs that have been committed by our competitor. If Zevitz Enterprise were to abandon this mana race, that wouldn't compel Hivez to stop exploiting their workers until they start showing symptoms of mana shock. I can confidently say that we hold ourselves to the highest ethics. We are the good guys here, Abbot. We care about our workers.
The nature of your business and Hivez's is one and the same, regardless of your self-perception of innocence.
I'm well aware of that. And I want you to be aware that Zevitz Enterprise cannot afford to back away, not when we're so close to doing some good for Cadia. Not while we're so close to bettering the lives of the people for the greater good.
Pray tell, Mr. Zevitz, is there no greater good than the grace of the gods? The genesis of humankind was the very nature of chaos, but from the maelstrom came purpose. Purpose that we should accept with open arms as a mandate from the gods. Commit not sacrilege against our creators. Revere the few gifts they parted ways with. Mana, poisonous in nature, is one such gift from the gods. And yet, ingrates such as Hivez, the Board of Academics, and even yourself seek to turn this forbidden fruit into gold through the blasphemous study of science?
Perhaps we're all ingrates and should just sit back and accept our roles as laborers, miners, and clergymen in life. However, Venerable Abbot, you forget that our very creators granted us with a paradoxical personality trait. By nature, we are all curious. We're just a bunch of curious creatures, and through the blasphemous study of science, we have learned about the untapped potential of mana. Our curiosity gave birth to science, which in turn has encouraged all of us to foster a sense of adventure and ambition. We know that other continents exist beyond the seas, but does the threat of succumbing to mana shock stop us from risking our lives to go explore those lands? We are contradictory, flawed, and stubborn, and yet, Venerable Abbot, these were all the paradoxical personality traits that our creators bestowed upon us.
Blasphemy. Was a discussion of the schism between a servant of the gods and a blasphemer of science all you sought from me?
No, we actually came to make a suggestion.
If this is but more blasphemous words, I must ask you to leave.
We are currently developing machines to assist miners in detecting mana within our mana mines. They will be powered through colored mana. They will be able to receive any commands from its operator, and they will be able to physically carry out those commands.
Inconceivable.
However, we have decided to temporarily postpone the deployment of these machines. Instead, we would like to donate a batch of these machines to specifically assist the Abbey's sisters when treating the workers from Hivez who are afflicted with mana shock.
What purpose would it serve you to offer such charity?
Venerable Abbot, we would like very much to assist your Abbey.
I beg your pardon?
Originally, we had planned to construct a new hospital in Cadia, but it's come to my attention that it would have gone unused. People seek salvation not from a hospital ward, but from a house of worship. But let's be honest, your Abbey's resources are overwhelmed by the byproduct of Hivez's aggressive aggregation of colored mana and P1 usage. The reality of the situation is grim, and there's no sugarcoating the fact that your Abbey will not be able to save even a quarter of your current total. People afflicted with mana shock syndrome can only be saved through counteractive purified mana treatments, and those treatments can only be performed by people knowledgeable in both mana and medicine. We may share a schism in ideologies, but I believe that we both want to save as many suffering people as possible. Venerable Abbot, we formally request the assistance of your Abbey. If you could personally convince them to be relocated to one of our neighboring or nearby clinics, I'm certain they will be more receptive to the idea.
Intriguing.
Aside from our medical branch, they will be attended to by the machines that I described earlier. We're collaborating with a prosthetics manufacturer in order to apply synthetic skin to the units, which would make them appear more human. Oh god. Anyways. I mean, we all know where this is going. Also, I just realized it's called the Sisters Project, probably because it's helping the sisters in the church. Not because they were modeled after his sister. Although there could be double meaning there, but yeah. I think that's where that went. Anywho. Nobody will ever know that it's a metallic interior underneath an automaton's exterior, and they will be more than durable enough to handle the most volatile patients. This way, the Abbey sisters won't be subjected to hazardous conduct from their patients. Internally, this work being done on our machines is known as the Sisters Project, in honor of the Abbey's fallen sisters! Venerable Abbot, won't you consider our proposition?
Intriguing, very intriguing. So intriguing that I had almost expected a more veiled proposition from a capitalist of your standing. The Abbey's Code of Ethics forbids from entering or even entertaining offers or requests from non-affiliates.
But Abbot...
You may hold your peace, Mr. Zevitz. You need not elaborate any further. But how intriguing it is that you wish to bear the burden of salvation. For someone who sounds relatively indifferent about the matter, your proposition was rather persuasive. Consider your request granted.
You really mean it?
I do, but I will not permit the presence of your machines within the confines of this abbey.
Why not? If they're around here, then the Abbey sisters won't be in harm's way.
I agree this situation needs to meet a swift conclusion, without any more losses of life to the populace or this abbey. But your deep-rooted agnostic ideology makes you blind to the will of the people who come seeking salvation. They desire to be spared from death of the divine, not your mana-powered machinery. No matter how much their human-like skin meshes to their metal exteriors, or how convenient or obedient they are, they will never be human. There is no purpose in gaining salvation from the hands of the lifeless.
Was Sid
Just silenced by a member of the clergy.
However, I do condone your efforts to deliver salvation to the suffering. You may use the name of the Abbey to begin relocating our current patients to your clinics. Allow me some time to inform Convent of my decision.
Oh my. How is there a disconnect?
I'm sorry, the bridge became unstable just now. It did? I'll restart the process, just give me some time.
My lady, how are you faring so far, Selphine?
Well?
Do you feel okay so far? Is there anything wrong?
Yeah.
So, which is it?
This is taking forever. I never thought it'd take so much effort just to stabilize and reestablish the bridge for the mine dive.
Is there a difference between this monocroft and others like it? Under ideal circumstances, a monocrofter would have the use of a mana line with ample amounts of mana to help stabilize and replenish the user's purified mana. However, this particular monocroft requires more than the usual required amount of stability, which drains the user's purified mana faster, leaving them fatigued. I find it incredible that even though we three are all human, only you two may wield the magic of monocroft. It's almost as if you two were from an entirely different species.
I wouldn't put it that way.
No.
Ultimately, what factors into a future monocrofter is that person's upbringing in the vicinity of ample mana lines. If both Ritona and I were to merely remain here, we would lose our tolerance to mana over time, and we'd become permanent residences of the outer pole. And then, we would be exactly the same as you, Mr. Falster.
I understand now.
If I may, I had a question concerning your visit to the Abbey in Cadia. Do other cities in the Outer Pole worship mana deities as well?
They do indeed. And on that note, the expansion of Zevit's enterprise to most of the corners of the Outer Pole may all but be attributed to Aileen. She was the first to suggest we should work with the Cadian Abbey and build a relationship. I didn't quite believe it at first, but there are surprising amounts of people who place all their energies in worshipping ethereal deities.
That's astounding. During our first day in Cadia, a pawnshop owner said the outer pole was a god-forsaken continent, and that the lack of mana lines led to the study of science.
Well, that is pretty accurate. Although we have a great contradiction for two schools of thought, religion and science, we're all still capable of coexisting without any issue. People need to devote themselves to one or the other in order to survive. Eventually, you may even end up returning to an abbey or convent for deities that you may have personally dismissed in the past.
I suppose my presumption of the outer pole being more streamlined and less dynamic was completely wrong.
I gotta say, I really admire both Sid and Aileen Zevitz for their determination to help those afflicted with mana shock. I feel like there's so much I could learn from them even now.
As do I, Miss Selphine. My main prerogative focused on the technological front of the business, but Sid and Aileen were always so eager to improve the lives of the people living on the outer pole. Until I lost them both, I never realized the extent of their warm, compassionate embrace for all people.
Lost them both? Forgive me, Mr. Fulster, but I was under the impression that only Sid Zevitz passed away. Did Aileen Zevitz pass away as well?
Sadly, yes. Weeks after Rune's body was discovered by a cargo ship, having succumbed to mana shock herself, Aileen also passed away. You see, Rune poisoned her own mother before her death. She laced her mother's afternoon cup of tea with a concentrated amount of Process 1.
No! Aileen. She was poisoned by her own daughter?
I don't believe it!
Before poisoning Aileen, Rune had frequently stopped by our branch's hospital pharmacy, several times in fact. Evidence collected from the pharmacy indicated she had smuggled several vials of P1, enough to kill around 10 adults. The peacekeepers of Cadia discovered one vial in her room, but failed to locate the rest. Days later, we discovered that during a crucial meeting, several of our representatives, along with other conglomerate executives from around the outer pole, had all died from P1 poisoning. The incident set back all our plans to expand Zevit's enterprise throughout the outer pole. Had the meeting gone through without any issue, the companies they all represented would have all been merged with Zevit's enterprise.
I was at a sincere loss for words. What would drive the daughter of such a compassionate, kind woman to poison her own mother? Why would any girl as young as she was commit such an atrocity? We did hear of her reputation from a few people. They all described her as unusually difficult. I believe that may be the only civil way to quote the lady proprietor's description of her.
One person called her a hellspawn.
You're almost honest to a fault, Selphine. I find still that label to be highly exaggerated. What was the motive? There has to have been some sort of motivating factor for Rune to commit such an unthinkable thing.
Unfortunately, none of the evidence that was gathered was ever indicative of a motive. The only thing we knew about Rune was that she was born with an unusual genetic defect. One of the last images we captured of her cerebral cortex detected an anomaly. The affected division of her brain regulated emotional output and emotional registers. Under normal circumstances, she was never capable of feeling happiness, sadness, anger, or shock. Even though she could absorb and learn information pertaining to emotions, she would never experience them through normal stimuli. As a result, she was bereft of a guilty conscience.
Mr. Fulster, are you suggesting that Rune developed destructive tendencies because she just couldn't process or register emotions like the rest of us?
I can't very well confirm that now, because all the answers to our questions died with Rune. The theory of her developing an unrestrained and destructive persona is one that was discussed but bore no fruit.
Excuse me, I hate to interrupt, but I've managed to reestablish the bridge, so...
Are you certain you wish to continue, Miss Selphine? You appear slightly pale.
Yes, I'm sure.
Are you ready to resume where we left off?
Yes.
Very well. The next portion concerns Rudo and Rune. Before we begin, I must warn you both of the disturbing nature of the following events. Are you certain you want to proceed?
I am, Mr. Fulster.
The following events took place several years after Sid made contact with the abbot of Cadia's Abbey. High-Vez's workers continued to almost systematically succumb to the effects of mana shock syndrome. At the time, Both the Abbey and the newly constructed Zevitz Medica Hospital's resources were stretched quite thin. But at long last, the day came when the frost that had been accumulating on the status quo of our grief was finally shattered. One of the Abbey's affiliates had attained irrefutable evidence concerning collaboration with Hyves Corporation by both the Cadian government and Board of Academics. While this finding sowed great discord between the Abbey and government, the evidence only served to strengthen the ties between Zevitz Enterprise and the Abbey. The unprecedented five-party situation we all found ourselves in was incredibly peculiar. Despite the awkwardness of it all, life moved on. Rudo, who would be designated as the de facto successor to Zevitz Enterprise, proactively fostered an interest in his father's line of work, and often conducted his own study and research on the topic of mana. As I mentioned previously, Rudo was the brightest boy I ever had the pleasure of meeting, and he even proved my convictions with his superb academic performance. In all honesty, Rudo genuinely enjoyed the pursuit of knowledge, even though he always complained to Aline that his studies at the academy weren't challenging enough. That comment alone left a long-lasting and profound impression on me. However, there was always one thing that Rudo had to pursue. He always had to keep his eyes on Rune, who was indeed an unusually difficult child to deal with. Particularly, she was frequently observed to be inflicting physical pain onto others, with a large grin on her face. No matter what she did, no matter who she did it to, her actions dealt psychological damage and imparted unpleasant memories toward the targets of her destructive demeanor. When she was about 6 years old, though, Rune's latest act escalated beyond the point of no return. She used a stick and stabbed out the left eye of Marcus Gerkuis, Hertzvon's nephew, blinding him.
The Gerkuis have all the reason in the world to be upset, as do we.
No kidding.
What could have caused Rune to do such a horrible thing?
That's what I'd like to know, Albie. Aline, well, my wife's heartbroken, Albie. You know how she can be. She puts on a smile in the face of every difficult thing in life, but now she's starving her fragile body.
I'm sorry to hear that. I'm concerned about Rudo. I hope he doesn't feel any shame or discomfort from this incident.
Albus, I think this might be a good opportunity for us. Yeah, he's almost at that age, too. I think he's ready to start carrying some of the weight.
He's become lost in his own stream of consciousness.
Soon after the incident with the Gerkuis boy, Sid withdrew Rudo from the academy. No overt reason was ever given for the move, but I learned why soon after. The day after withdrawing Rudo from school, Sid brought the 10-year-old boy to my laboratory at Zevitz Enterprise headquarters and assigned him to serve as our company's youngest intern. Laboratory 9 brought the brightest brains from around the outer pole into one facility. Rudo, with the trauma from his wrangling Rune off the Gerkuis boy, redirected all his energies to observing and shadowing our research. Sid hoped that the constant exposure to that environment would somehow assist in grooming him into a capable leader, but Rudo was not without his shortcomings. He would enter our laboratory every morning and leave with us every evening. As an unforeseen consequence, we practically turned the boy into a complete introvert. His ability to absorb and intake all our research was incredible. However, whenever we asked for his thoughts on devising a new application for our research on a real-world scale, he always struggled greatly with conception. For all his brilliance and willingness to learn new things, Rudo lacked an active imagination, leading to difficulties conceptualizing and innovating new applications for mana. He didn't have the fire for innovation that Sid had as a child. Additionally, Rudo had an unusual penchant for being overtly courteous, polite, and reserved. While these traits were not faults per se, they were often perceived as weaknesses. In time, the consensus of Laboratory 9's members was that no matter how much they tried grooming Rudo to become his father, he would never escape Sid's shadow. Years after Rudo began his internship at Laboratory 9, the day finally came when the Peacekeepers released Rune from house arrest as penance for her actions against Marcus Gerkuis. During the years, she was taught by a home tutor, who would often bring her by Laboratory 9 in order to expand her horizons. Who would have thought, though, it wouldn't be her horizons that needed the expanding, but our own. It became evident the more she stopped by Laboratory 9 that her intelligence surpassed Rudo's. She could conceptualize and imagine the scenarios that Rudo could not. Several months after her first visit, she came to us and handed us a solution for a key issue that had confounded us all for some time, in regards to the power source for the sister project's automatons. Rune inherited both her father's brilliance and fire for innovation.
but was crippled by the absence of emotional registry, while Rudo struggled with conceptualization, but possessed his mother's compassion. In fact, I dare say that Rune could have easily surpassed Sid in terms of innovation, as her submitted solution came in depth and far sooner than any proposal by Sid. We all came to the realization that Rune might one day be the one to succeed Sid. However, our recognition of Rune's contributions to the sister project caused Rudo to silently, but gradually, lose confidence. And yet, oddly enough, he exhibited neither jealousy nor malice. In fact, after she was released from the Peacekeeper's order, Rudo and Rune appeared to be far more cordial to each other than before. His confidence renewed, he began taking a more active role at Laboratory 9 and was promoted from intern to research assistant. Somehow, his seeming lack of an ambitious choice of post felt similar to an admission of defeat, an open acknowledgement of Rune's talents. My theory became even more evident after Rune chose to become an intern and continued to overshadow Rudo's contributions to our research. I suspected that Rune, even though she appeared to be on cordial terms with her brother, was almost intentionally trying to mentally break Rudo into a sense of inferiority. The subtleness of the entire situation was off-putting, but it only ever appeared that Rune was earnestly assisting Rudo in his research. I found it dubious that anyone not close to the siblings would have noticed the sparse instances of Rune's animosity towards Rudo. In fact, my concerns were reaffirmed one day after both Sid and Eileen came seeking my advice on the matter.
Look, I'm not against sending her off to school, I just don't see the point.
I've heard you already, Sid. Now I want to hear what Albus has to say about the matter. Please, Albus, be honest with me. You and this big oaf over here are the only people I can trust, so please don't mince words.
Regarding whether or not you both should chance sending Rune to school, I don't find any issue with the proposition. 6 years have passed since the incident with the Grukuis boy, and personally I feel that's been more than long enough.
Now, we're talking about different things here, Albie. You know all about the incredible work she's done for us. What's the point in sending her to school now when there's nothing to challenge her? I just don't think it's worth anybody's time.
I'm also referring to the social aspect, Sid. I believe she ought to make some friends her own age. Aside from Rudo, there's no one else in her life she can even remotely relate to. She's growing up and missing out on everything her peers experience.
And what about all the experiences we missed out on, Albus? We didn't go to school, and we turned out fine.
I absolutely agree with Albus. I'd rather she enjoy life free from the constraints of a dimly lit laboratory. I want her to experience and hopefully embrace her femininity.
Well, I never thought I'd hear you advocate for a setting that's non-conducive toward education.
You know me better than that, Albus. There's a fine balance that must be struck. She'll never learn about all the other possibilities in life if she continues producing nothing but brilliance in a laboratory. I'm not blaming either of you. I am glad she's assisting our goal of helping the Abbey's sisters, but I also want her to interact with other children her age.
Eileen has a compelling argument, Sid.
You know me, Albie. I'll confers with folks, no problem. Heck, I'll even argue with them until I'm blue in the face. But I learned how to interact with others over time, without formal instruction. If I could learn, anybody can.
Why did I marry such a stubborn oaf?
Sid, you also forget your genius and intellect were unlike that of any typical 11-year-old. Yes, neither of us had any academic involvement because we couldn't afford it. And yes, we turned out much better than most, but sometimes, even I regret missing out on the life I could have had.
Regret? Schmegret. I regret nothing about the choices I've made, old friend. My word on the matter is to let Rune decide for herself. I agree to disagree with both of you. I won't force my daughter to do anything she doesn't want to do.
Neutral to the very end.
Do you agree with him then, Albus?
I do. But what I have to say is of little significance. Ultimately, you both have to come to an agreement, as parents, regarding the best course to take with your gifted child. However, I suggest you both take into account what she wants, and respect whatever decision she makes. And with that said, I will assume she'll enjoy a change of setting as well. I'll see to it she undergoes a physical evaluation. I'll set up an appointment at our hospital and forward the results to whichever institution you both decide to send her to.
Thank you for this, Albus. I appreciate you doing this.
I'm sure Rune will appreciate a change of scenery more.
Several weeks later, before they enrolled Rune into Cadia's Academy for the Gifted, I conducted the final phase of her physical evaluation. Using a procedure known as mana resonance imaging, I captured a cross-section image of her cerebral cortex in order to determine that she was free from any neural abnormalities.
This isn't right. This can't be right. Is the MRI properly calibrated?
Unfortunately, it is calibrated. I personally witnessed it being serviced by one of our contractors, who went through every step in the book before having me sign off on the job. I personally tested before putting pen to paper, Director.
Director Fulster, this image, it just can't be right. Is this really Rune's cross-section?
Not only can this not be right, it is downright impossible. This image suggests that the daughter of our CEO cannot register or regulate emotions.
Absolutely absurd. This is unheard of. No human has ever been born without the capability of registering emotions.
Vothal, Nietzsche, I need you both to keep the findings of this image to yourself. You must not allow this news to be leaked under any circumstance. It would deal irreparable damage to Eileen if she ever found out. I will disclose these findings to the CEO personally when the time is right.
We had discovered that a crucial segment of her cerebral cortex, in the division involved mostly with emotional registration and regulation, was non-existent. The two other researchers who were present hadn't a single inclination to the significance of the finding. I consulted several Zevitz Medica staff in regard to the absence of this crucial segment, who all opined the impossibility of its absence. With all these statements in mind, we began to doubt the effectiveness of the MRS, which was still a relatively new invention. But for all of our doubts, there was at least one person who understood our findings and believed them with all their heart. The day I disclosed this matter to Sid, Rudo had been secretly listening in on our conversation. Unlike myself, Sid and the other two laboratory researchers, he was convinced by these findings, because he had seen things none of us ever had. It was several months after Rune began attending the academy before Rudo opened up on the matter.
This isn't a research journal. A book titled The Detection of Deception. It's a textbook concerning the nature of dishonesty and the psychological techniques used to positively identify deception.
Uncle Albus.
Oh, good evening, Rudo.
Do you have some time? I need to talk to you.
What's the matter, Rudo?
I couldn't believe my ears. He suddenly began accusing Rune of decapitation and slaughtering animals, for no better reason except to derive joy from watching them succumb to their injuries. There was no indication of such behavior after the incident with the Grakuis boy, so I could hardly be faulted for taking his claims with a shovelful of salt. I had suspected that this was Rudo's way of seeking retribution against Rune, using the image from the MRI as a pretense to justify his claim. There were plenty of possible motives to cite as well, namely Rune's crucial contributions to our research. Ultimately, without solid evidence to support his claims, I could only perceive Rudo's allegations as desperate, and could not find it in my heart to believe a single word he said. I don't expect you to believe it, though, Uncle Albus.
That's quite an allegation, Rudo. Did you tell your parents?
Not directly, not like how I told you just now. I beat around the bush, hinting that Rune could be up to her old ways. If I told her everything exactly as I saw it, I just didn't want my mother to suffer again.
A wise decision.
That's why I wanted to consult you, Uncle Albus. Nobody else would believe my word over hers.
That's not an entirely inaccurate assessment. I suggest keeping a close eye on her, Rudo. If there's anything I can do to help, don't hesitate to let me know. But as it stands right now, you do not have any evidence supporting your claims of Rune's wrongdoing. Without proof, your allegations carry no weight. Ask anyone else, and they'd immediately dismiss your claims as hearsay. What happens if you call on them to corroborate your claims and they feign ignorance?
I'm aware of that.
Very good, then. Also, is this book yours? Rudo, you don't seriously believe your little sister is being deceitful, do you?
I do.
How could you think that of Rune? Has she ever uttered a single falsehood in her life?
That's what the book is for. What I can say for certain is that although she may appear innocent, that book described several visual cues for deception and deceit, all of which apply to Rune.
Such as?
For example, a habitual liar is often observed to externally project and embody a capricious persona. They don't like being confined to one space after disseminating the deceit, have a tendency to migrate in order to spread their deception to a wider audience.
Well, I can't comment on the first. I do recall Rune saying she wished she could leave the outer pole one day.
I wasn't finished yet, Uncle Albus. They always have and wear a smile on their face to mask their deceit. Although the presence of a smile is evident, the rest of the face remains expressionless and unengaged. I'm sure you've noticed, but outside of Laboratory 9, Rune isn't very well received in the eye of the public. I asked several people for their thoughts, and they all said it was because when they talk to her, she appears despondent and lifeless. This reaction can be classified as instinctive ignorance. There's no greater psychological fear than the unknown. Should a habitual liar don the veil of intentional ignorance to all others in order to assume the essence of the unknown, then they strive to become an entity to be feared. I think Rune is intentionally invoking this practice of instinctive ignorance in order to elicit negative feelings from normal people. Moreover, after reading this, I believe she's plotting something terrible. She's keeping us all blind with her brilliance, but deep down, I know she's up to something far, far worse than what she did to Marcus Gercuis.
Now, just hold on a moment, Rudo. You're leaping to conclusions here without a shred of substance. You know as well as I do that Rune has been nothing but good and obedient. Now, I am not disregarding your allegations, but as an adult, I am compelled to judge and rule only after I hear both sides of the story. As it stands, your accusation against your own sister is insubstantial and incredibly hurtful.
I apologize, Uncle Albus. Maybe I went too far. In retrospect, Rudo didn't go too short or too far, but he just didn't have any proof of Rune's impending plot. I still remember every word he disclosed to me that day, but I didn't believe him. I made the worst mistake of my life that day. I've been repenting for it ever since. Several weeks later, Eileen collapsed after drinking her laced tea, and days afterwards, 12 executives from different territories on the outer pole were poisoned by the immunostimulant. Rune had all but vanished by then, but we would soon reunite in the most unfortunate way imaginable. En route to Cadia's port, a cargo ship discovered her body adrift in the ocean and unloaded it at the dock. Eileen, her heart and soul broken by the death of her daughter, was hospitalized for several weeks until she, too, drew her final breath. My mistake for not believing Rudo cost me the lives of 2 people whom I held dear to my heart. Their deaths set in motion a chain reaction, resulting in what would become the first collapse of Zevit's enterprise. Traumatized and clinically depressed over the deaths of his wife and daughter, Sid had become a shell of his former self. Even though he still had both Rudo and myself around to support him through the dark times, he wouldn't listen to either of us. From that day forward, he stopped caring about the company we built from the ground up and confined himself to Laboratory 9. He sought solace and solitude in the laboratory where he would spend the remainder of his life. One day, however, the status quo instilled by Eileen and Rune's tragic deaths was broken. When the Sisters Project was nearing its final day of development, we had produced several prototypes for detecting colored mana within our mana mine, contrary to the altered purpose of the project. The Abbey staunchly refused to accept Eileen's proposed charity, so we reverted the unit back to prioritize mana dowsing. Once the board of directors had convened to address the issue of the deployment state for the prototypes, Sid burst into the boardroom.
Thank you so much for watching this most recent episode of Fault Milestone 1. So we pretty much have Rune's backstory covered. So who is Rune now? So many questions that need answering. If you'd like to watch this whole series from the very beginning, there is a playlist on my main channel, youtube.com/pressart to continue, and hopefully you will stick around to see the conclusion of this story. We got like 4 or 5 episodes left, so you're good. Anyway, have a great day.